Hello and welcome to a series on learning Java. Over the series, you learn how to use all the syntactical elements of Java and start writing your own programs. But before we dive into Java, first, what is programming? We throw around this term a lot, but what does it mean? I define programming to be telling a computer to run code. Well, that's really vague. A computer can do a lot of things, but everything the computer does is ultimately running code. Somebody has to tell it what to do. Remember, computers can't think for themselves. They can't do whatever they want. They do exactly what you tell them to do. So that's the very first important thing. The computer is doing exactly what you tell it to do. Okay, so the computer is doing these things, but there are a lot of other devices that might be doing these things. Like I call this, the device that I'm recording this on, a computer, but we have other computers like TVs, smart TVs, and smartphones, and lots of other things that are running code like this. A lot of cars run code. Some household appliances like ovens and dishwashers run code. Anything where they have to be able to control the system, it's going to be running code. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what code is. We've got some fundamental parts of code. First thing, executing commands. This is like the really basic thing that a programming language or something running programming has to be able to do. Execute the commands in the program. In your computer chip, there's a bunch of different parts, and I'm going to connect these tasks of code to the parts of the processor. So there's one part called the CPU, Central Processing Unit, and that part gets a command and executes it. Then our next task, store data. Stores data, like most computers, store data in a RAM, random access memory, or in ROM, read-only memory, and also in caches and a variety of other places depending on the device. But this is one of the other really important things in code. You have to be able to get data and store it to be able to use it later. There are two things we do with data. We read to it. We read it. We figure out what value is there and use that value. And then we write to it. We put a different value in the space we allotted for this data. So most things in code, like data storage, we're going to be able to read to it, read what's in there, and write more data to it. Then we can do logic, or what are called conditionals in programming. You check for a certain thing and do different bits of code depending on whether it's true or false. There's a part of the processor called the ALU, arithmetic and logic unit. It does arithmetic and logic. It does computations of numbers, and it checks for values to see if they are true or false. There's one more thing we do, which is called loops, where we run the same bit of code multiple times. There isn't really a part of the processor that does this. There are a bunch of different parts of the processing unit that control what line of code we're running at any given point. So we can give it a command to go back to a different place in the code. And then we have other things in code. These are the really basic things, but there are other things to go advanced that can make our code look nicer or organize it better. Such as functions. Functions put some part of your code in a different place than the main part of your code so that you can reference it and so that you can reuse it. Those are the two main parts of functions. We can reuse them, and we can isolate it from the rest of the code so that we can figure out what's going wrong if something goes wrong. We also have arrays, sometimes called lists, and objects, which organize data. Functions organize code, arrays and objects organize data. And we have comments, which are not really code. They're like human readable bits that we put in the code so the other humans who are working on our code know what's going on, or future you, because future you doesn't usually know what past you did in your code. And so we have all these things in code, but what are they doing? So what are the goals of programming? There are 3 goals that we usually use. There are others, but these are the 3 major ones that you're going to see in like the really common programming languages. First, web pages. Web design is like a huge part of programming, but there's a lot of different parts even within web design. So first, we want to be able to display web pages. There's a really common language called HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, which implements CSS, cascading style sheets. That's usually used for most web pages. Then there are other languages like PHP, I don't know what that stands for, and JS, JavaScript, which can put other code, which does other things, into a web page. Then we want to do data, querying and managing our data. There are 2 major languages that we use for this, which are SQL, which really deals with a database. That's where we store a lot of data. And then there's Go, and there's other languages like Go. That's not the only one, which can easily reference to SQL and pull stuff out of a database. These are used for what's called backend development, which is when you have data being stored for a web page. There's the part of the web page that people see. That's what our first part is, HTML, PHP. And then there's a part of the web page that's storing people's data. That's our backend. We use SQL and we use other languages like Go to be able to use that data. And the third one is the fun one, games and simulations. This is like Python, Java, even blockly coding like Scratch. There's tons of languages where you can do things like this. And of course, lots of other stuff. Most languages aren't exclusively like, this is the thing you do. It's, you can do a lot of things, but here's where we're oriented. So we're going to be talking about Java, which is mostly in this third group. You can build games, you can build simulations, you can do number crunching, you can do all the things that you like think about when you think of computer. So I'm talking about like languages that fit into these categories. But what's a language? Well, languages in code are similar to languages in the real world. We talk about things. I'm talking about this in English. Somebody else could talk about the exact same stuff in Spanish or Hebrew or any other language. Different people use different languages to communicate the same ideas. It's basically the same in code. Within each of these categories, or like a specific kind of thing that the code is doing, every language communicates the same ideas, but they look different. They sound different if you're trying to read it. So that's the difference between languages. And now, with an understanding of programming, we're ready to get started and learn Java.